Alright, fight fans, Corruption in Boxing back to talk some World Boxing Super Series. The upcoming final in Russia is finally upon us. Not sure what happened. The final was originally scheduled to be in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. But if those of you that have visited the country would know that the only way you're getting into Saudi Arabia is if you've got an American passport, or if you're going there for work or religious purposes. So I guess the logistical reasons why the final didn't take place there is understandable. But the money is coming, the financial backers are from Saudi Arabia. So in any case, they managed to resolve whatever differences, get a venue. Usyk agreed for the fight in Russia. He's had training camps over there in the past in the amateurs, so it's not likely it's hostile territory for him. He speaks the language fluently. They all speak Russian, so there's no problem there. And he's glad. In a way, it's fantastic that this final is happening as well. We're getting really sick of all of these little protracted sagas which are just dominating boxing, failed negotiations, fights being delayed, etc. It's really an unfortunate time at the moment. Deep into the summer, you would expect more action, but just a very frustrating middle part. So thankfully we've got one of the most anticipated fighters of the year. A tremendous matchup. You cannot really get a better 50-55 on paper. So we're going to try and do our best to try and do a prediction, but this is one of I really need a 9 bar or an ounce of skunk and really sit down and think hard as to who's going to prevail in this fight. It really is a very difficult one, but so it's going to be an undisputed championship. Oleksandr Usyk from Kiev, Ukraine. I think it's his 15th fight. Holds the WBC and WBO titles. Murat Gassiev, the Ironman from Russia, is the WBA and the IBF. So the winner collects obviously all 4 titles and the Muhammed Ali trophy as well. Becomes boxing's current incumbent, only undisputed champion. Now, if we try and sort of analyse, have a look at both fighters. Now, we'll turn to Usyk a little bit more because a fighter that's pretty well familiar around the world now, both in Europe, where he's been fighting and based and raised, as well as in the United States, given his contract with HBO. A road warrior. But when you've had a large, extensive amateur, almost 300 fights, he's fought in over, 35, 40 countries. So this is nothing new to him travelling. He did it in the semi-final with Midas Breeders in Latvia, so he's travelling now to Russia. So now, Usyk, highly decorated, we know, a European world amateur boxing champion, as well as Olympic champion as well. One of the best amateur boxers of the last 40-50 years. So he made the transition to the professional ranks, and he was able to challenge a world title relatively early. Plus he'd fought in the World Boxing Super Series and won on 2 of the AIBA tournaments as well. One in Turkey, I believe. Now Usyk, southpaw. I think Usyk actually is I think he's actually glad he's fighting an orthodox fighter and not a southpaw. Because in the amateurs, I remember 2 southpaws giving him trouble, and in the professional rank, he's fought, Krzysztof Blavatsky, southpaw, who was the champion. Usyk travelled to Poland to fight him, and he fought a very smart fight. He didn't try and engage with Blavatsky in the pocket too much. I counted about 35 looping left hands that Glowacki threw, but Usyk was able to evade. Had those connected, could have been a different story. Glowacki is a very hard, is a heavy-handed fighter, dangerous. So Usyk was a little bit more circumspect. He actually boxed him, used tremendous foot movement, but that was under the tutelage of James Ali Bashir. And Usyk's cornerman status has been in chaos after that. He went briefly with Russ Amber. The idea was to be trained by Vasily Lomachenko's father, but from my understanding that relationship hasn't materialized, and for this particular training camp he's back with Russ Amber, who Usyk describes as a supervisor. I don't know. Those who remember, Russ Amber was overseeing his duties for the Michael Hunter fight. And Usyk looked like totally disillusioned in the corner. He looked like he didn't quite understand, or didn't quite grasp, or didn't want to adhere to the instructions that Russ was giving him. So I'm surprised that, Usyk has gone back to him, but Usyk says that he's actually been learning from him. Russ is very good in calibrating the game plan and strategy, so bizarre choice, but fair enough. Russ did a lot of work with Adonis Stevenson as well, so he tends to find these chaotic but very talented southpaws to work with, so fair enough. Okay, now in the semi-final against Marius Breeders, a very close fight. I had an opportunity to watch the fight again today. Not a great deal of clean punches landed by either fighter. Not a great deal of combination punching landed by either fighter. Usyk was better on the early part of the fight, I felt. Usyk, what he does, he tends to structure his fight, I've noticed. And especially fights that go above a certain number of rounds. Now, for the early part of the fight, he's very active with his lead hand. He literally uses his lead hands like a fencer, and fencing is very synonymous with the way European boxers tend to utilize their lead hands. There's a great deal of similarities. Fencing is all about striking, landing points and evading the strikes of your opponent. And a lot of Russian, European, certain extent French, and I've seen German boxers in the past, but not for the last sort of 10-15 years, utilize that technique as well. Usyk will double, triple the lead hand, but no, he doesn't load up on that lead hand. It's not a hard jab. I mean, if you look at Anthony Joshua never double jabs in any of his fights. The reason being is because his feet are so firmly anchored to the ground, and he throws a power jab, a jab which is designed to debilitate the guard so he can land that 1-2, the straight right hand after. Usyk, completely different. Doesn't load up. His right arm is relatively straight. He'll double, treble. It's all about lead hand control for him. Distance management. He doesn't want his opponent coming too near him, nor does he want to get too near his opponent to try and smother the attack. It's a probing, fencing lead hand, and he'll double it and quadruple it. Because why do fighters double and quadruple a jab? Now, you throw one jab, you're more likely to get countered, so hence you throw two to try and preoccupy the opponent to avoid being counter-punched. But the other reason why trainers ask their fighters to throw double jabs is it allows the fighter to pick up his feet. So you throw a double jab, you pick up your feet, you come into range, fire a hook, fire an uppercut, right hook, and then you spin off. So it essentially allows you to cut that distance, land, and then get out of distance, disengage, break range. But what Usyk would do, he'll double, treble, and he'll step to the right, step to his right, come back with the left hand. So for the early rounds, he was using far more footwork, and he's predominantly using his lead hand. Not a great deal of utilization of his left hand. He's just calculating, he's thinking, he's calibrating, he's thinking which way how the opponents react, and Briedis, what he was doing, Briedis was trying to get underneath the jab and come back with shorter punches, but Usyk wouldn't allow him to cut the distance too much, because he likes to, sometimes he'll step to his right, sometimes he'll double, treble, and he'll step back, he'll sort of lean back, but his head is always down, and he's very conscious about once he's fired his jab to bring his right hand back up, and he'll go back to a high guard position, and his chin is always tucked down, so defensively he's very conscious. So after 3-4 rounds, then he starts landing power shots to the body. The middle rounds is generally where he does his body work, and then for the latter sort of round 7 onwards, Usyk will try and walk you down, and he'll try and finish you. He's not a boxer, he's a fighter, and his objective is he wants to take you out. And the reason why Usyk's gas tank is very good as well is because he does not load up on his punches until the latter part of after he's broken you down, frustrated you, bemused you, depleted your gas tank, taken the sting out of your punches. Yeah, then he'll begin to sit down on his punches, and we saw that against Marco Huck. What he did very well in that fight, he walked down Hook, trapped him up against the ropes, was working the body better in that particular fight. Hook, we know, is high guard, comes back with that straight right hand, power punch, sometimes with an uppercut as well. Hook was forced to lower his right hands to protect his body, thus giving Usyk opportunities to come back up and fire, left hooks, start stepping up 30, 25, 30, 32 punches, in those rounds, just a barrage attack, and eventually, the referee intervened and stopped the fight. But against Marius Briedis, I felt Usyk, really neglected the body work. Briedis was maybe Hook, I guess Usyk was a little bit more wary of Briedis' power. I think he definitely punched harder than Marco Huck. Briedis was trying to land that counter right hand, straight right hand. Briedis was trying to really cut the distance, fight at sort of short mid-range. Usyk's objective was trying to keep the fight long, but eventually later on in the fight, Usyk did start walking down Briedis, but couldn't land any sustained, couldn't hurt him to the extent of landing a sustained attack. Briedis was definitely feeling the pace a little bit more, but not to the extent where his punch output significantly depleted, thus allowing Usyk to dominate him. He was always dangerous, but he was pot-shotting a lot more in the latter rounds when Usyk was trying to walk him down and trap him. Usyk was firing a straight right-hand counter as well. So he's not... Usyk is not really a counter-puncher. He can counter-punch, but nah, he's a high-output, probing, systematically breaking you down, then going through some sort of an overdrive in the latter rounds to try and stop you. And he did that with Michael Hunter as well. We saw he was getting frustrated with Hunter's movement and unorthodox sort of looping punches as well. Eventually, I don't know whether it was Ross Amber or Usyk's idea. I think it was Usyk's. Or Usyk just thought, fuck this, I'm just going to walk him down and try and knock him out. And boy, oh boy, did he turn on the afterburners. You know, he was throwing, you know, some ridiculous number of punches in those latter rounds. You know, 70, 80, 90, you know, may even be a little bit more. And, you know, Michael Hunter was extremely fortunate the referee didn't, you know, stop that fight, because he was being absolutely pummeled. And I'm not even sure if we've seen him sort of 18 months down the line now. You know, that fight should have been stopped round 10. So Usyk, you know, that's him pretty much now. Murat Gassiev, I think he's what is he? He's about six years younger. Both of them around 6'3". So tailor the tape, they're roughly about the same. I'm not sure about the arm length. I guess Usyk is slightly longer, but I could be wrong, you know. Orthodox fighter. A fighter who I think is still improving. I'm not saying that Usyk is regressing, but I think Usyk's corner situation is meaning that he's I don't think he's developing as much. A little bit more. It's difficult when you're getting different instructions all the time, or you're just trying to find, you know, a coach. So, you know, that stability is not really there. But Murat Gassiev is, you know, with Abel Sanchez, and you know, they have a very good balanced camp. You know, Murat will combine it from Russia, and then he'll come to Big Bear, California. You know, he trains a lot with, you know, a lot of the fighters in that camp. You know, Denis Shafikov, good friends. You know, Gennady Golovkin. You know, they have a very good relationship between them. They all support one another. You know, so no doubt, you know, Shafikov is helping him with footwork. You know, trying to be elusive. You know, a southpaw, and Gennady, obviously, you know, middleweight champion, so yeah, you can imagine he's a valuable asset. Now Murat, you know, had a very short amateur career, so, you know, 12 fights or something ridiculous, but you know, he's a natural talent. You know, over here in the United Kingdom, you know, we got Anthony Yard, and you know, his coaches are pushing him very slowly. You know, their excuse is that he had virtually no amateur background, but Murat Gassiev had less fights than him. And he's one fight from being sort of the undisputed Cruiserweight champion. So it's about levels, I'm afraid, and mentality and ability. And Murat Gassiev is just in a completely different league. Now, Murat Gassiev is more of a, I think he's much the heavier-handed fighter. Single punch is both with his right hand and with his left hand. You know, he put Denis Lebedev down with a counter left hook to the body. You know, Lebedev, a southpaw fighter, shorter, was countering better with his jab and right hook. Murat Gassiev was on the front foot pretty much that fight, but he was targeting the body a little bit more. I think he landed about maybe around 60 body punches. You know, that was the main purpose of, well, that was the main benefit of his attacks. Has a good jab, and he can vary his jab as well, both the speed and the angle. But a lot of his attacks is structured from his lead hand. If you look at his lead hand as well, it's always perpetual motion. His lead hand is never stationary, even when he's in a defensive position as well. He'll parry a hell of a lot of punches with his lead hand, but when punches are coming in his direction, he'll use his right hand in a high guard, will be relatively stationary, but his left hand isn't. He's always circling, moving. So a very, very unique sort of defensive posture. But with Murat Gassiev, he has the ability to counter punch on the front foot, and that's a vital component. He used that in good effect against Denis Lebyadev, Vladarchik, who he put away very quickly. And with Junior Dorticos, he added sort of new dimensions to his game. He had the ability to take the sting out of Dorticos' punches, make him miss and miss badly, block a lot of his punches, knowing that Dorticos, a power puncher, explosive power punches, don't really distribute their punches that well over the latter rounds. So a wise strategy, relying on your youth and your superior conditioning as well. Showed great cerebral components in that fight. But he was landing counter punches from round one, blocking with his left hand, sort of moving his head on the ropes. A fighter doesn't really want to be with his back up against the ropes, but Murat was in that position a few times, but he was still able to use his upper body, very good side to side movement, never a stationary target. Dorticos would fire, he would evade, come back, straight right hand through the guard, left hook through the guard, and then eventually, the combinations he lands, it's his left uppercut, right hand, left to the body, and then left hook up top, and I think that's probably his most devastating combination, and that's how he took out Vladarchik, the former Polish world champion. Very good fighter in his day, but he was a little bit long in the tooth, but he'd never been stopped before, and credit to Murat Gassiev, who took him out with a devastating combination. Now, Gassiev is also one of the fighters who, as the rounds progress, his workload begins to increase as well. I think he's very good in pacing himself, but he does have the ability to put away with the lead hand. But up against a southpaw now, Denis Lebyadev's movements did give Gassiev trouble to try and cut off the ring and force him into a choke point. Set those traps. He didn't show an A-level ability in terms of cutting off that ring. And up against Usyk, I feel Usyk is not going to stand there and engage with Gassiev, for prolonged periods from the first half of the fight. I think Usyk is going to use more foot movement, more lateral movement, and Murat Gassiev is going to be on his front foot. And Usyk is a far better fighter than Lebyadev. Although Lebyadev loads up on his punches far more, especially with that right hook and left hand. But Usyk throws, far greater volume than Lebyadev. Has better footwork than Lebyadev. Is taller than Lebyadev as well. And I think defensively is much better as well. Better reactions, chin tucked down. So I can see Usyk frustrating Murat during the early parts and winning a lot of the early rounds from simply outworking Murat with his jab, probing with that jab. Now Murat Gassiev, his objective is to get at mid-range, at short range as well. Mid-range, short range, somewhere in between there. He's not a phone-buff fighter, but he can fight it. And whereas Usyk, he doesn't like fighters coming too close to him. He wants to keep the fight long range, mid-range, but somewhere in between that region as well. He'll be happy firing long right hands, and I think he's going to be able to do that during the early parts. He can shift both ways. What he will try and do is try and shift to Gassiev's right, because then that gives him a clean line, that always opens up his left hand, and it puts Murat Gassiev's head on his axis at all times, and it effectively takes away Gassiev's jab as well. Murat will have to keep shifting to his left, keep turning and turning, and Usyk will probably pounce on him when he's turning and fire sort of straight right hands. So Murat is going to have to anticipate what he's doing and shift to his left. And what orthodox fighters actually do very well against southpaw fighters, the trick they use is that they fire left hooks. So that effectively stops Usyk from going to his right, and it will force him back to his left, so it opens up Gassiev's right hand. But we didn't see too many of them against Lebediev, so I'm not sure if he's going to employ that tactic too much. He wasn't really left hooking from the lead position against Lebediev. When he was coming in, he was firing more the lead left hook to the body, but it wasn't used in the way of setting up a trap. For that, he was just pretty much using his jab and his straight right hand. But sometimes he would fire a right hook to stop Lebediev firing his straight right hand. He'll try and hook on top of that, and it was a good idea. And that was what was working in the middle after the fight. So how this fight is going to play out, I don't think Oleksandr Usyk is going to be able to stop Murat Gassiev. I don't think he's going to be able to put him down to the counter either. Murat does possess the power, but I think he's going to find it difficult to. He's not going to be able to engage with. Usyk is not going to allow him to engage for too many prolonged periods. He's just not going to give him that many opportunities. But Usyk may be tempted to know that the fight is in Russia now. If the fight with Briedis was was a majority decision in Latvia, one of the judges had it 1-1-4, two of the other judges had it 1-1-5, 1-1-3, very close. Now in Russia, the judges, and I thought Usyk definitely won that fight. I think a 1-1-5, 1-1-3 was a reasonable card. I think Usyk definitely outworked, Briedis. So it all depends on the judges, and we know that the judges are not really going to be influenced to award a draw on this fight. Somebody has to win. So I'm sure that's at the back of the mind. And when judges have have a mandate, have an agenda, then it kind of upsets the apple cart. You'd like to give them a free license just to adjudicate how they want it, but the tournament has been delayed, and no doubt Kelly Sowland is determined that the tournament concludes satisfactory, because they've got tournament scheduled for next part. So sometimes politics does come into the matter. So somebody's going to win the fight. I think it's going to go to points. I think Usyk has got a very good chin. Marco Huck hit him with some scintillating right hands. Briedis hit him with a one uppercut I can remember finished, and a left hook, and Briedis is knocked out the WBA regular heavyweight champion Manuel Char with a tremendous left hook. No leverage up against the ropes. That guy can punch. People are fools if they object to that supposition. But Usyk is he's a barrel-chested, big cruiserweight, with a good chin as well. Very good boxer. I think it's going to be a very, very close fight. I think the last 4 rounds are going to be spectacular action. That's where I think Usyk will take the risk of not moving as much and, fighting with Gassiev. If he's not sustained too much punishment in the early parts, then believe me, he's going to stand there. Well, he'll stand there for certain periods and he'll trade with Gassiev. He's a supremely confident, almost arrogant sort of individual, whereas Murat is a very humble. But both of them, in tremendous shape. Both of their trainers have spoken about how they're just some of the most relentless workers. In their training camps, training 3 times a day. Murat Gassiev doesn't like the running too much, but he'll still do 6 miles a day. But that's not one of his proclivities. But his stamina is okay, and Usyk, he can fight 12 rounds, no problem, because he's not loading up on his punches as I mentioned. So I think it's going to be a very close fight. It could go either way, but I think Usyk will probably win. It might be 4-2 after 6 rounds, and I think the early advantage is going to give him sufficient equity, sufficient number of rounds to bank. And I don't think he's going to lose too many of the last rounds. If Murat is definitely having success, then he does have that ability to go back on his back foot. He can fire. He can fight off the back foot. No, Murat Gassiev can also fight off the back foot, but Usyk is better fighting on the fly. Gassiev can counter punch on the front foot, but it's in straight lines. It's not really in that many angles. Usyk can circle and fire punches, jabs, left hands, and I think that's going to be a massive, that's going to be the key attribute in this fight: lateral movement and punching, as opposed to fighting going backwards. Footwork, defense, and work rate, and I think Usyk will have enough of that to win the fight, and I think it will be a 1-1-3. Could be a split decision. Yeah, I think maybe a majority decision, split decision, majority decision, around a 1-1-5, 1-1-3. One of the judges may even have it a 1-1-4 or 1-1-4 as well. But I could be wrong, but I don't think there's going to be no knockdowns. I don't think there's going to be any knockouts. I think it's going to be a close competitive fight, game of chess early part, and I think it will step up last 4 rounds, and I think we'll get some tremendous action, tremendous exchanges. But in either face, I wouldn't begrudge Murat Gassiev, one of my favourite fighters as well. I think both fighters have got an argument, whoever prevails, to be the best fighter in the world. I don't subscribe to this pound for pound, because the criteria has become so distorted. People don't really understand what pound for pound really, what the definition is. They combine sort of resume and skill, but pound for pound, this mythical sort of top 10 was always about skill, the ability to move up and comparing that skill against other fighters. But I don't know anything about that. All I say is that Murat Gassiev, for somebody who's had limited amateur background, to become an undisputed world champ, an undisputed Cruiserweight world champion, undefeated as well. In 25 fights at the age of 24, outstanding achievement. Similarly with Oleksandr Usyk in 15-16 fights, for him to achieve that status. And looking at the opposition that they've beaten coming up as well, you know, Dorticos was undefeated, Moiras Bridas undefeated, Marco Hook was the best cruiserweight for a number of years. You know, although Steve Cunningham, you know, did give him a spanking over there in Berlin. Vladarchik, former world champion, so, you know, it's been a tournament with some very, very good, you know, the best, you know, the 4 semi-finalists were all undefeated champions, so it was a perfect scenario. And now the number 1 and number 2 seeds in the final, so, you know, cream rises to the top. And Oleksandr Usyk for me, you know, undisputed champion, winner of the Muhammad Ali trophy. But yeah, that's my breakdown, analysis of the fighters, and you know how the fight will go. Yeah, really looking forward to it. Tomorrow night, Moscow, week after the World Cup final as well, so the Russians have, you know, in for a treat. Yeah, hope everybody enjoys, and we'll definitely be back with a post-fight, you know, reaction, breakdown, summary, whatever, you know. So, thank you for your patience all. Corruption in boxing. Transmission over.